Let's turn these chords into this. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to show you how to sound design an incredible sliding, gliding R&B pad sound in a free synth called Vital. You may be familiar with it. If not, the download link is here. Go cop that. Now, I could give you the preset, but I would rather that you followed along and understood how this synth worked, because once you understand how something works, you can then go and make presets yourself, sell your own little preset packs in Vital or any other synth that you have. Because once you understand the fundamentals of how synths work, most of them, I say most because there are some exceptions, but most of them work in a very, very similar way. So we're going to do some sound design. We're going to look at a little bit of theory, very simple, but again, just to elevate your chords to the next level and show you some common chords that are used in R&B. Stick around to the end because I'm going to show you both parts of this sample and some clever but simple ways we can keep things very interesting for the listener. So let's look at these chords first. Very simple. We are in the key of G major. We're going 4, 3, 2, 6. And then the second time around, we repeat that again, but I just put a diminished passing chord in before we come back and cycle to the C major chord again, which is the 4 chord. So we start with our 4 chord. This is just a very, very basic C major triad. You've got C, E, and G. We add one note, the B note, and that makes a C major 7th, which is a beautiful chord. Very simple, just in root position here, which just means that C is our lowest note and the B, the major 7th, is our highest note. Then we move a bar on to the B minor chord, which in its B minor triad in its most basic form there. We add again one more note, the A note, which is the minor 7th in B. So we have these two chords. Very simple, and you can make a lot of things just using these two chords. But let's take it a step further. Our third chord in the progression is a A minor. We add one note here to make it an A minor 7th, the G note. And we add one more note to give it a little bit more color, the B note, to make it an A minor 9 chord. And the final chord is just an E, some kind of an E minor chord, the 6th chord in G major. So we have a E, G, and a B, make an E minor triad. We add a D note and it makes an E minor 7th. And all I've done here is I've just doubled up on 2 notes at the top of the chord, the G and the B, and from the last chord. And then moving back to that diminished chord, we can approach our C major chord, the first chord in our progression, from a diminished chord based off of a B root, which is a semitone underneath the C. And to make that diminished chord, all we did was skip 2 notes, play a note, skip 2 notes, play a note, skip 2 notes, play a note. And that creates a diminished sound, which is a tension chord, which just really pulls us back towards that first chord in the progression. And I use it all the time, and you're going to hear it all the time in R&B. Now, these chords may not sound that exciting on the piano, but it's what we did with them on the next sound that really brings them to life. So once you install Vital, it's going to open up like this with a sawtooth wave in oscillator 1. Oscillator 1 is just where your sound is coming from. You can see it's peaking. First thing we're going to do is just turn this right down, change our oscillator to a sine wave, which is a soft sound, which is exactly what we want for R&B. Envelope 1 is what shapes the sound. We can create plucks, we can create pads, we can create any kinds of sounds using this envelope, which is also known as the amp envelope or amplitude envelope. We have a few controls here that we can manipulate. We have an attack, a hold, a decay, a sustain, release. You don't always see a hold, but it's handy to have it when we do have it, but you will always see an ADSR, an attack, a decay, a sustain, and a release. Turn a little bit of attack up,
and then I just play the sound for you. Watch what happens.
I hope that you can realise that if you learn some basic synthesis, it can really help you to understand what goes into different sounds. So guys, hopefully you've already got something great out of this video, and I hope you're going to stay to the end. There's so many more good tips and tricks for you to improve and elevate your sample game. Go follow me on my Instagram, my handle is right here. Cop some of my free mini kits, the link is in the description.
See how the sound slides in, and that's exactly what we want for this kind of pad. Add a bit more release here. We can add some hold for pads as well. So this is the shape that the sound will take over time. And the cool thing about this synth is you can see an animation of your sound in real time as it's going across. Sounds really nice now as a basis, but obviously there's no pitch bending. We're going to come to that right now. So this part here controls the global pitch of this shape, and we want to just come into here and we can pull it down to -36, which is 3 octaves lower than it was initially sounding. And if we were to play it now, it would just sound like a sub. Well, it would sound terrible because there's about 4 notes playing as a sub, and you would just go and just rumble. So we won't do that right now. We're going to pitch this synth back up to where we started. And to do that, we're going to use another envelope, just like the one that we used before, slightly different shape, and we will hear how that affects the sound in a second. So if we click here on envelope 2, we're going to start playing around with envelope 2, and all we want to do is we are creating that pitch bend effect with a shape here. We want the pitch to go from low up to high, and then we just want it to stay there until the chord disappears. So we can add a little bit of release here. We're going to take this little node here and we are going to drag it, hold and drag it to that pitch there, bang. It's a bit fiddly to change this here. If we go over to the matrix tab, this tells us exactly what we've just done. We are taking envelope 2 and we are modulating the transposition of oscillator 1. Now if we come here and we click, right click, enter value, we want to type 36 into there. Simple as that, we've got our lovely pitched sine wave synth. We can do all kinds of things with this. We can change this envelope shape slightly. We can make the chord come in slower, quicker. Envelope 1, we can change the attack here. We're going to add another oscillator to make this a little bit more of an exciting sound. We are going to open up oscillator 2, and this time we're going to let's grab something like Drink the Juice. It is still following envelope 1's amp, so it matches that. Turn the level down a little bit so it blends in nicely, and we could maybe up the unison on this sound to like maybe 6 voices. And let's grab that envelope 2 and let's route that to the pitch, but let's do the same thing again. Let's drop this right down to maybe like 36 again. Let's drag envelope 2 onto there, set that to 36, and we come back in, and you can hear that that now sounds really cool. Let's change the level there. We've got some unison going. We can try all different things, detune that, add more unison voices. We can change the waveform to anything. You can see like the possibilities here are just endless when you know what you're actually doing. We're not finished yet, so let's send these now to the filter and watch what happens. Now we're going to add a little bit of key tracking. It means the higher up the keyboard we go, the more or less of the filter is going to open. Now we're going to do one more thing here with this sound. We're going to take an LFO, which is a low frequency oscillator, and we are going to modulate the cutoff of the filter with this LFO. So if we leave the LFO as it is like this and we just drag it over to here, that's way too much. We can change the level here like to this. This LFO shape is opening up the filter every time we play the chord, and we can change that to a square. Anyway, all fun stuff you can try. That is the basic sound. Now let's shape it with some free plugins. TDR Nova, and this is a really handy dynamic EQ. Now this sound's got a little bit too much mud at around 200 Hertz, so I just dialed in this little node here on band 2 and changed my threshold so that it ducks a little bit of the sound at around 200 Hertz. Now I can decrease the amount that that's ducking. by changing the threshold, and the visual representation of that is here. So if I leave my threshold down here, nothing's going to happen. As soon as I start touching the blues in the sound, you can see I'm doing a little ducking, and a little bit goes a long way here, guys. That's a really, really good free way of doing it. We're going to add some tail chorus. So this, now we're talking. And we can also add a little reverb, and I'm just going to use a stock Logic reverb, but you can use any reverb for this.
So that key sound is really the only main key sound in the whole first section of the sample. The only other sound that we've got is that Travis Scott, Drake type sawtooth bass. I might need me some ventilation. Really easy sound to make, again in Vital free synth. I've already made the sound here, I'm just going to talk you through it. So you want to choose a sine wave again like we did on the first synth. Drop the pitch to -24 semitones. Level was around here. One voice of unison, ignore the rest of this. Your amp envelope should look something like this. So a little short attack so we're not clicking. Hold and decay like this, sustain like this, release like this. So check out my settings here. It should automatically be sent to the filter 1. That is our sub oscillator. You probably won't pick that up on small speakers. Don't worry, that's just our low end, and experiment. It might even work at -36, depending on what range you're going to play this bass at. We add a second oscillator, and this is going to be the main sound that carries the main oscillator that carries this sound and gives it its unique characteristic. I want you to put around 4 voices of unison, but you can experiment. You can even go up to maybe 6. A little bit of detune on the oscillators here, and the level around here. Send that also to filter 1, and on filter 1 you're going to make that something like this, and this is the default filter. I put a tiny bit of key tracking on there, which is the basic sound. Can experiment with different kinds of saw waves here, and it will make the sound a little bit more harsh. I've also added a distortion which enable that sounds like this. Again, you can add a third-party distortion plugin or a native distortion plugin to your DAW. That will also give this sound more bite, but just be careful. The more distortion you add, the less sub you're going to get, because distortion will eat your sub, your bottom end. So you might want to layer this bass and just have a designated sub for your sort of below 100 hertz stuff, and maybe keep this for your anything above 100 to sort of your 150, 200. When you start going above sort of 200, 250, the sound probably gets a little bit too bright and too high and too much into the mid-range for it to sound like a real, real meaty bass sound. Added a little bit of phasing on, but for this sample, because it's R&B, I didn't want to make it too drastically harsh. Notice that with these chords at the top as well, with our main chords, I play them quite broken to leave space. Space is really important, especially in R&B. R&B is sexy music. It's meant to evoke a certain feeling, and just like, I took an Apple loop and I chopped it up. It had a pitched sound in it. So I actually pitched this Apple loop up by 3 semitones to match the key of the song. That is in key. It really adds something percussive, nice percussive texture. And then towards the end of the loop, you can see I chopped a little piece out here to let the groove breathe. And also I added this little 90s stutter, which you heard a lot in Timbaland, Sonder and Brent Faiyaz. You hear this all the time, this that little skippy kind of beat there. I added a tiny little vocal chop from Monty Booker's kit, put it in key with the sample, and then I dragged in a little vocal from Splice and just pitched it into the key. Added a bit of processing on it here, some chorusing and an auto filter, just really, really making it kind of, again, unintelligible. A lot of breathing room for the artist or another producer to add their source on top. Then some vinyl texture, and that really was all that was in the A section. And then for the breakdown section, I went to the Mini Monster. I picked out this preset, the Ambience Pulse. The synth is just huge. I wanted to use a different synth from what I normally use. I really like this sound. So the
The only thing I did for variation was add this little note between some of the chords, and that was all that I felt this needed in variation to just change up the sample, to stop it from being boring and keep the interest. And I doubled this up with, you guessed it, Pigment Sound, which was my favorite multi-keys, round robin. Some samples, again, that I just dragged in from a Coupe one-shot kit. And as always, doing its magic. You don't really need many sounds after you've added these in. Added a couple of textures from Louis' kit, and then my mastering chain looked like this, a little bit of sound shifter.
If you want to know a little bit more about music theory and what goes into making high quality, unique samples, check this video out.